Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So on the show today, Vaszily, very interesting guy, has studied personal development, has a website called theartofantiaging.com, has lots of blogs about anti-aging, and I liked his perspective on anti-aging because it wasn't about being against aging, it's being against the stuff that makes us feel bad about aging. So it was a very colorful and fun show, so I look forward to the entertainment you get out of today's show. So let's get into it. Well, Vaszily, welcome to the show today. Glad to have you on.
Well, I'm excited to be here. This should be fun and worthwhile.
Yes, definitely. And we're really excited to share what you have to share with us today with our listeners. I love your mission. It says, my overall mission has been to help people bypass physical, emotional toxins that drag them down and, in short, live long and live remarkably well. And I think that's very well stated and very well said. So kind of what does that mean, as we lean into that? What does that mean to you, I guess, live long and live remarkably well?
Sure. So I've been in health, wellness, success, personal growth, all of these areas now going, well over 2 decades, 2.5 decades now, really. Wow. Based on working with some of the top doctors in the world and researchers, some of the deepest researchers out there in different spheres, I can sum up, I guess we'll call it my own findings, and I've specialized in different areas, certainly healthy aging and longevity being one of them. But what I've discovered is that it's a simple equation. To be healthy, to be happy, to live long, to be successful at whatever it is you want to be successful at, it is really all about what you allow inside of you, your being, we'll call it, and what you strive to keep out. That's the general equation right there. A lot of people hear that, they may not, they may get it in principle, but many of us, all of us really don't always practice it. It's not the easiest thing, but it's something to keep at the forefront, to write down is what I recommend to people, because no matter what you are consuming, it has an impact on you. And the question is that going to be a positive impact, a little positive, extensively positive, or is it going to have a negative impact? What you allow inside your mouth, onto your skin, into your brain via your ears and your eyes. So it could be the media that you're consuming, the food you're consuming, the products that you're consuming by putting them on your skin, which, by the way, is indeed consumed, the products that you're using around your house, which are also consumed. Whatever it is, we ought to strive to be ever more conscious about, is the stuff that this is composed of potentially at least neutral for me, sort of good, very good, great, or not so good or terrible.
Right.
And that goes for virtually everything. It's about what you allow inside of your being, and what you keep out is what you are going to be.
Right. Thank you for listening to the BriteVibe podcast today. We've got a special event coming up here shortly, July 12th through the 16th, called the Global Happiness Summit. And we're bringing resources from around the country together to talk about happiness and what that means and how to have more of that in our lives. Go to BriteVibe.com, BriteVibe, VIBE.com for more information about the Global Happiness Summit. And we look forward to seeing you July 12th through the 16th. It's very complex, but it's very simple the way I see it. I mean, because I think in reality, it's exactly that, right? We've had many guests come on the show. We had the Blue Zone guy on, Dan Buettner, last month, and he talked about the number one thing you can do to add life or add longevity and happiness is actually move to an environment that's already living longer and happier. And I was like, what? I mean, and as he said that, it was kind of shocking because I was like, what? But then at the same time, I'm like, well, we are physical beings. We put ourselves in situations, right? And those, I mean,
Right.
we're the ones that have the ability to put ourselves in front of a TV that's, CNN or MSNBC all day, and that's going to take away happiness, I'm assuming, usually media and news and
Absolutely.
right. And then
Absolutely. And it's about sources too. Yeah, what you're talking about with Dan is it's the people. In a way, you are consuming the people that you are around.
right.
Certainly the environment, and he's also talking about, I'm sure, climate, but the habits of the people that you are around become your habits, or are
Right.
far more inclined to become your habits. So indeed, if these, folks in the Mediterranean or, in Japan are eating healthier diets and they're walking, every single day up and down the street or wherever they're walking versus driving everywhere, you're more inclined to do that. That's a perfect example of what I'm
Right.
talking about. Right?
And so I'm always curious at the backstory. I love the backstories of the guests that come on the show. Like, what in the world? You didn't just, what in the world made you start to go down this path? Because usually it's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah.
Of like, why do you care to help other people, like figure this out? What in your life was the catalyst, I guess, for propelling you down this path of kind of figuring out happiness or figuring out health?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good question, a kind question to ask. Thank you. And so today I am the founder, and I guess we'll call it the voice in the face over at the Art of Anti-Aging. And it doesn't mean against aging. That's ridiculous. It means against, and this will sound familiar after only talking a few minutes to me here, against all the nonsense myths out there about getting older that really hit people hard, but especially women. So you turn 40 and the joke goes, you're over the hill, right? But it's not just a joke, because the way that aging is portrayed still today in, Western society is that it's the beginning of the end, that it is indeed over the hill, that it's time to start dying, that it's time to start suffering, that and people adopt this belief by and large. They should not, but many do. Oh, I'm supposed to look like crap. I'm supposed to feel like crap. Increasingly, I'm supposed to lose my memory. Here's the fact. Again, I have worked with, helped so many, doctors at this point in my career now, really good people who are digging in deep and are not just following the, we'll call it the typical medical establishment model, but are going beyond that in terms of natural approaches and other areas as well, and bigger picture, the mind-body aspect of things. And what I have seen over decades of research, decades with them, is the opposite's the truth. As you get older, these ought to be the time of your life, really, the time to thrive. And it doesn't have to mean you're going to get aches and pains and sick and terrible wrinkles all over your body. It doesn't mean that. It's just that the mindset we've adopted is that. So how did I land? That's where I've been now for the last 4 or 5 years. Again, prior to that, I suppose you can call me a brand in personal growth, focused on the most important experiences that we can have. And prior to that, I can go back and back and back. So my road's been interesting because I've been led, I guess you could say, in a way. However, here's my story in brief. I'm 52, and you can basically cut my life in half. And the first half of my life was rough. I went through, we all do. And I certainly had my fair share of hardships, let's just say. So when I was young, my dad was a very good man until my age of 9, when he turned severely alcoholic and severely abusive to me, to my sister, to my mother. Now his story, wouldn't even be believable in a novel. He was a World War II veteran who was a spy for the U.S. He was in Germany, in bunkers, as a spy for the U.S., saw things. He met this, I can go on and on with stories of his life. He met a woman, fell in love early on, in that period of his life. She turned out to be a Russian spy. They were going to get married after the war, and then she was disappeared. This is just one of a sequence of events in this man's life that were tragic. Now, he had some good in his life, too. He was previously married to my mother, so I had a brother. I was only 3 years old, and this boy was 13 and was hit and killed. My dad had to deal with that,
right.
and on and on. You know, there's all kinds of circumstances, but in those days, you know, we do live in good times. By the way, a lot of people need, you know, perspective to understand that, because in those days, when you dealt with issues like that, you didn't have counseling. You were looked down on as crazy. You know, only crazy people went to therapists. So he never really effectively dealt with all of these deep things. And long story really short, took it out on the bottle and took it out on us. So I had a rough patch, growing up around the age of 9 onto, you know, basically. So to his credit, he kicked the alcohol years later, but he was still very angry. And then he got sick, severely ill, and was in and out of hospitals, dying for the last 10 years of his life. And we were right there with him. So by the way, I got to witness a lot of the, I'll just say it outright, the ineptness of the medical system, during that period too. So a lot of my awareness came through being in so many hospitals, so many days and nights. So he did pass away. I became a very young father myself, struggled hard, super poor. I was living, in a studio apartment in a bad part of the city, with mice visiting me and my wife and my baby son on one, single twin mattress at night, super poor. But to our credit, I guess I'll say, I still pushed through. I had worked full time. I went to college full time during that period, started with community college, and, we worked our way through. But I was very down and depressed. And one thing, long story short here, one consistent thing that kept me alive, literally, because I had my moments, was powerful women in my life. And I was raised by powerful women. I guess I'll say my mother, my sister. Today I have a wonderful, very strong wife, and powerful women kept me alive, kept me going in that period when I really, wanted to literally give it all up on more than a few occasions. I had some wonderful female teachers as well. So there was this pattern in my life, where, fast forward years later now, I could have taken any, multiple different roads, but I saw the impact of this mindset of what people were consuming regarding aging, meaning it equals the end. And I'm like, that doesn't jibe with reality. So it's kind of in honor of these powerful women, especially because that messaging hits them the hardest with this nonsense, frankly, about aging. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to simply share the truth here. It's giving people the better food, so to speak, meaning here's the facts about eating well and what to avoid and what really, to consume, so to speak, including, for your mindset, for your body, because you should thrive at this period of life. And that's where I'm at today with the Art of Anti-Aging, the big following over there. It's just giving people, at the end of the day, a lot of the facts that we're, that I guess typically we don't hear about, but, they're true. There's so many things that people can do to help them thrive. And, it gets buried because of all this noise out there, which is largely, let's just be honest, perpetuated by, in my view, media, no matter what your political inclinations feels like today. I love what you're doing, because what you're doing is far more high integrity than any major media out there almost today, period.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah.
And it's true, and folks like you, because they're all corporate controlled. A lot of people forget, whether they're, they hate Fox News or they hate CNN, at these two ends of the spectrum or anything in between. If they're in one camp or the other, everyone needs to remember those are corporate entities, and their one and only real job is to their shareholders. Right. And so they're going to feed you what escalates their ratings, their revenue, and makes their shareholders happy. That's just the way it is. I'm not saying I'm pro, against, but that's the reality of the situation. Right. So in that environment, people are not hearing so much of the good news.
Right.
The things that can truly help them, the things that ought to make them thrive in life. They're not getting enough of the good food because they're falling for the crap. All this bad news. Well, there is. And let's not, I don't want to make it seem like there's not horrible things going on in the world. There certainly are. But there's an equal, if not greater amount of great news out there every single day, small things. It just doesn't get the media attention because it's, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
Old,
Yeah. Right. The old
and it
right.
still stands today.
Right.
It won't get attention. So, boy, somehow that's my story.
I love it. I love it. I love your passion behind it. And I always, I'm always so fascinated because I find the people that typically want to help others the most are the people that have typically suffered more than most. And certainly your story, I think, is an example of that, you're really driven to help people from a very deep, true place. It's not you're not motivated just by, finances or just by success or whatever. I mean, you got a reason to be alive and you're on purpose. And that's why I love the show. That's why I love doing these shows. I mean, no matter what I'm feeling before I walk in the studio, I always feel better at the end of these shows because it's like I just get to talk to such inspiring people that are living their purpose. They're living on purpose. They're living with passion. And it doesn't mean that they don't have challenges and bumps along the road too. That's part of living life, right? I mean, it's not about as you kind of said earlier, it's not about kind of living in this fantasy land that there's nothing wrong or nothing
Right.
going on out there. In fact, a lot of your passion and purpose is about how to offset some of the misinformation or information that's maybe outdated would be another way to say it. Obviously everything's been upgraded, but how do you get the word out about stuff like you're doing that's just really upgrading people's physical environment? I mean, I think you're in the anti-aging space, but to your point about anti-aging, it's really anti-misinformation about aging.
That's right.
And so how do you get the word out? Because a lot of that does go to happiness. It does go to fulfillment. It does go, I mean, all those things, right? If your body physically is fighting toxins, well, and I also, in the healthcare business, but I own nursing homes and assisted living centers. And I tell you, when you're in your 70s or 80s or 90s or whatever age you're at, and your health is deteriorating, nothing else matters, right? Nothing else matters. I mean, I had COVID when we went through this whole thing, and I tell you, when I had COVID, nothing else really mattered. I was just like, when I had work didn't matter, and stuff outside my house didn't matter. It was really just my family and myself, and that's kind of what mattered to me in that moment. So kind of what do you focus on now as far as education, helping people? I mean, for this show, for our listeners, what would be a couple things that you could say, hey, these are some things you could do today, immediately, or at least be aware of to educate yourself to start to shift to a happier place? Because I totally agree. I think we have gotten to a point as a community or as a society where we're just taking in too much garbage. So, yeah. Right. And which is going to make us unhappy. I've got friends that sit there and watch the news, whatever channel it is, they watch the news all day long. And when I'm around them, they just bitch and complain and whine, and it's the sky is falling. And so a couple of years ago, I just went, you know what? I'm going to not watch the news anymore. If it's so important, somebody's going to tell me, right? I mean, right. Throughout the course of my day, if there's a tornado, I live in Kansas, so if there's a tornado coming, somebody's going to tell me that there's a tornado coming, or I'm going to hear the sirens, right? I don't have to watch the news to hear that. So kind of what are some things that you typically, or for people just starting out or just having awareness around that, kind of what are some things you would recommend?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And, it really does come down to how you feel after doing anything is a great way to assess, the value of that thing. It doesn't work in all cases, not necessarily, but in most. What I mean is, ask your friends if you're able to, and I'm sure this won't, I think it takes more cataclysmic events sometimes with some people to really, be convinced that what they're doing is not necessarily good for them. But nonetheless, it's an interesting exercise to ask people, pay close attention to how you feel after you engage in something and walk away from that thing. Let's talk about, since we're talking about emotional health really right now, and I'll go into other avenues too. But in terms of emotional health, when you sit down and you watch that news and you step away, how do you feel? It's clear how people typically feel. They feel agitated, frustrated, scared, angry at other people. And there's all that negative emotion. And then it's just it's trying to apply some common sense and say, how do you think that if you repeat and repeat and repeat that pattern, what is that going to do to your own health,
Right.
your own sanity, your own inner peace, your own productivity. If nobody cares about anything else and people just want to get rich, that's hurting you too. If you cared about nothing else, you're not going to be nearly as productive when you're dragged down by anger, rage, fear, and all the emotions that sort of thing perpetuates. So pay attention to how you feel after doing things. It's the same with food, right? Eat. Who does, many people, we all love, not we all, but many people love the taste of fast food. That's why it's so popular, and the fact that it's super cheap. Well, it's manipulated that way. There are scientists doing that because what they're doing is they're manipulating food to appeal to your basest, your taste buds, the umami feel, the mouth feel, and all the satisfaction of the salt and the sugar and all that. It's very carefully engineered. There's scientists who do that. And so, of course, in the moment, it's going to feel really good. But how do you feel? 10 minutes, an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it may be later. A lot of people are tired and, they feel kind of dragged down by that. Pay attention again to how you feel. This is that whole conscious aspect of things. Is if you want to succeed at anything, pay attention to what you're allowing into you, like I said at the very start, in these regards. Now, there are some areas where, listen, again, I've been in this 20 some years, and I was working with what were considered then either advanced cutting edge doctors or quacks, depending on who was doing the talking. Right. And what they were talking about 20 years ago was processed foods might not be very good for you. This excess amount of sugar is something you want to watch. And I remember back then, quacks, you're crazy, they wouldn't, and now people are suggesting things like maybe you shouldn't put these chemicals on your skin called deodorant and aging creams or whatever it might be, because they're full of toxic, synthetic chemicals. And now today you still have the same people or the same type of people. Quacks, that's crazy. They wouldn't put stuff in those products if it wasn't, if it was bad for you. These are the same sort of people that were shouting quacks about this food message years ago. All right. Why they do that, whole nother conversation. I don't even know half the time. And it's just certain, certain human nature aspects of things. But the point is that there are areas now that have been, more, I guess we'll call it exposed to pay attention to. I think a lot of people, not all people, not enough yet, but many people are on board with, the food message. That doesn't make it easy to do. Awareness and practice are two very different things. And we all struggle. Listen, I mean, I've been in this, and it's still a struggle, because who doesn't like stuff that tastes really good? A lot of sugary stuff or whatever, but we're aware. That's not necessarily good for us. We ought to be eating more of the green leafies and less of the, processed salty, greasy stuff and all the, mediums in between. The point is that we as a collective are more aware of this today, and it's more accepted. Okay, organic makes sense, especially in some cases, and, avoiding processed makes sense. Fine. But then there are other areas where people will be resistant today to the message, or they just don't know it yet. Those are areas where it's my latest focus. I try to put my attention, because again, I just, like you said, I'm like, wow, you could be so much healthier, so much happier, so much more successful. Whether I want to or not, some would call that an empath or empathetic. I think it's simply because I was raised, by powerful women again, who just were very empathetic, and it just, rubbed off on me for better or worse. But I just feel that with people. I'm like, wow, there's some relatively simple things you're doing that are destroying you, destroying your productivity. We talked about the media they're exposing themselves to. And it also comes down to products and things that they breathe in and use every day. We're with products that we put on, we'll call them cosmetics and personal care products. Boring to some people, but listen, the average woman uses 12 personal care products a day, and on average, those contain 168 different chemicals. That's something that people are putting on their body every single day. They are literally thousands of potential toxins in these ingredients that are allowed, especially here in the US. In the European Union, they banned over 1,300 different chemicals. Here in the US, 11 Only 11 have been banned. That should be a message for people. If you are putting stuff on your body, I don't care, again, if it's deodorant, perfume, anything that you're putting on your body, this is one of the next waves of consciousness, I guess we'll call it, out there, that's just starting to really, you're starting to see some awareness on labels and things like that. But you are eating these foods. These are foods. Most of what you apply to your skin gets absorbed into the body. In other words, you're eating it. And it's designed to, and in the case of many of these products, of course it isn't, wouldn't have any kind of effect if it didn't get absorbed. But if I can bore you with the science here, but if the molecules are small enough, it gets into your body. And most of these are designed, or otherwise, they're just sitting on the surface of your skin, not doing anything, right? Do you really want to allow these synthetic and known toxic and potential toxic ingredients into your body? Of course you don't. I mean, what happens is it's not, the companies behind this know, short term, they're trying to avoid any easy associations. So they're not going to feed you some arsenic or something that's going to hurt you right away.
Right.
It is instead the fact that you're 168 different chemicals per day on average, as I just noted, for women, and the cumulative effect of that. It doesn't take very long for that to have an impact on how you feel. If people have symptoms, for example, listening right now, and they've always not been able to pinpoint, well, why am I tired all the time? Why do I have little dizzy spells? I would suggest cutting out all the cosmetics just for 2 weeks to see what happens, for example. It's a powerful source of these. Many people don't know this. Another area that we could switch over to, very similar to that, cleaning products in the home. Boring maybe to some people, but listen, we use several to dozens of these in our homes, and we're in these enclosed spaces called our homes for 90% of our life. These days. We're supposed to be outside a lot more as human beings, but we aren't. We're inside, and the pandemic didn't help that cause, did it? So we're inside, our homes 90% of the time these days in our lives, breathing in what has been shown to be far more polluted air inside the home than outside homes. Same thing. You're consuming that. You question the source of these things that you're allowing inside your body. And let's just say there's some, I'm just going to throw it out there, 28-year-old young woman or young man, and what they're really concerned about is just they want to be successful in their career. To believe that this doesn't matter to them is completely untrue, because like you pointed out, your health, including your mental health, your clarity of your brain, the amount of energy you have on a daily basis has everything to do with your success, no matter what it is. And it has everything to do with allowing or not allowing these things that we're allowing inside of us.
Right. Yeah, totally. And for me, it started, probably 15, 20 years ago. And I started, small, and it would just became, it's refined over the years, right? It wasn't like I went from, and I think for listeners, nobody goes, well, typically, I won't say nobody, very few go from having a traditional kind of upbringing in life and eating traditional foods and when I say traditional, fast food stuff, cultural stuff that's in our culture, right? And then all of a sudden they switch over and 100% of their diets, now all organic right? For me, it was kind of like the first time somebody said, hey, the deodorant contains aluminum, right? Yeah. And I went, what? And they said, yeah, and you're putting that right on your skin, right, in a very sensitive area that absorbs a lot of toxicity. If you put whatever you put there, it kind of absorbs, right? And I was like, really? I was like, that's weird. Well, I'll stop doing that, right? And so I went and sourced deodorant, and now there's tons of choices for deodorant. Even back then, there was 2 or 3. Now there's 50 different or more different deodorant. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it just became a process of more of upgrading things. I always look at it as I'm upgrading or up-leveling my life versus eliminating. For me, it was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to stop doing this thing, then what's the better version of that? You got it. It's not like I quit eating chips. It's just I got a lot like a cracker that's not processed as much. It's got 3 ingredients or 4 ingredients. It's made with organic stuff, right? Versus Doritos, right? It went from, but it was kind of every area of my life. It was, and it still is, right? To this day, my wife and I with our kids, I mean, we're super focused. We're not extremists by any sense. We're not living, in a tent out on the lawn or or whatever, but we do consciously think about, and my wife loves to study and read stuff, but we're constantly thinking about, okay, what, if, to your point, if these things are making us feel sick even at a subconscious level, then that's going to drain some of our happiness. That's going to drain some of our energy. So, we experiment with stuff all the time and tweak this and tweak that and look and say, oh, okay, yeah, what if we added this supplement in or that we know this from a good source, or we eliminate this type of food. Yesterday we were having a whole text conversation about a drink that was kind of all natural, and so we had to dive into. My wife dove into the what's all natural mean, because right, that's a big catch-all for stuff that's not necessarily natural, right? I mean, it's kind of like all natural is kind of a way of saying, well, we can put about whatever we want into it because it came from at some point the earth. Well, everything came from the earth at some point. We're not grabbing stuff from space, right? So yeah, I think, and so. Because I think I had gotten overwhelmed in the beginning. I think some people do feel overwhelmed with like where to start. And I think, as we've talked about here, cutting back on news, starting to maybe read or study a little bit more about like what you're talking about. What are we putting on our skin? What are we putting on our body? There's alternatives that are a lot more accessible today than there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago for all of these things, right? It's not like they don't exist. It's not like you're going to have to go from your toilet to a composting toilet today, right? I mean, so it's, and people like you and companies like you have are bringing that education to the forefront and saying, hey, here's, if you're putting this on your skin, here's something that's better because we're sourcing it better. We're making sure it doesn't have these things, and you're going to have similar or probably even better effects from it because it doesn't have all this stuff that's going to come back to bite you in 5 years or 10 years, right?
Yeah, or even a year.
Right.
Yeah, in some cases. And, you bring up a wonderful point, because there are people who embrace this so vehemently that they then get worried and overwhelmed by it.
Yep.
And I will try, to talk to those people and say, listen, your worry is even worse than the thing.
Right, exactly.
That's not the point here. Mm-hmm. The point is it is a journey. The point is it is a step-by-step process. And the beautiful thing is that any step that you take it often has more benefit to you than most people imagine.
Right.
Let's talk about, I guess we're talking about the skin aspect of things. Mm-hmm. So we'll stay on that for a moment. When I say stop for 2 weeks, I'm just saying to see the impact. I'm not necessarily advocating no more cosmetics and personal care products of it. There's some great ones out there. I mean, that are clean and, but in that regard, if you are going to make changes, I usually tell people the closer it is to your skin, or the more you're putting it on your skin, and the longer it's sitting on your skin, if you're going to take it step by step, those are the first ones I would change. I might change deodorant, which you brought up, be the very first step of all.
Right.
Try to go to a clean one because it's sitting there in a sensitive part of your body, like you said, all day long, every day. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to the creams and stuff you're putting on. They're sitting on your skin all day or all night, those two. Shampoo, sure, it's loaded with stuff, and don't get me wrong, it's making contact and some residue is sitting there. But if I was going to go in order and just take a step, I would change my shampoo later. The stuff that's sitting on my skin all day. Mm-hmm. There's just some common sense, and you can apply that same aspect to the products you use inside your home. Mm-hmm. If you're spraying, a lot of these air fresheners are terrible. They're loaded with garbage. Yeah. And if you clean your toilet once a month and you're using something bad there, but you're spraying, I'm not going to name brands, that brand or those brands around your house every day, cut that out first.
Right.
If you're going to take it step by step, because you're only using that toilet. I mean, I don't know how often people clean their toilets. Was that a bad example?
No, that's a good example. It's a good example because it's the exposure, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. If you're exposed to it every day or regularly, look at that first and say, is this good for me or not?
Anything that you're consuming, you can't change it all overnight. Don't sit there and worry about doing so. Oh my God, now I know that there's all these horrible chemicals, thousands of them literally allowed in these products. I have to change it all. No, you don't. Just step step, little more has phenomenal, your body, or your brain, if it's in the case of, the people or the media you're consuming, thanks you in a big way when you do that, I mean, again, if you're, while you're cutting out, cosmetics for 2 weeks, try cutting out media for 2 weeks, the major media.
Yep.
I'm kind of tongue in cheek because don't do both at the same time necessarily, but point is, try it.
Yeah.
Try and see how you feel when you say what you did, which is, I am not going to watch any of those news programs. Certainly not the nightly local news, but I'm not going to watch any of these programs for 2 weeks. I think a lot of people have a fear factor, then I won't know what's going on, like you said.
Right.
But yeah, you will. Like you said, if there's anything important enough, it'll find it, especially in this day and age.
Right.
We all have these cell phone things, they're called. And somebody will inform you of you'll find a way if it really matters to you. But step away from all that. Kind of do a cleanse, of your psyche, of your mind, and pay attention to how you feel. I would fathom to say you're going to feel pretty good, or certainly better than you felt in a while, unless, some major, personal life experiences in the way, of course. I mean, but by and large, most people are going to feel much better. That's a message. Wait a minute, maybe I should indeed not be allowing that stuff inside of my being. So,
right. And I think your point's valid in that, and we've had other guests. Amy Moran comes to my mind. She was a guest early on when we started this version of the show, and she talked about, she did 21-day challenges, but just with herself. So she'd say, because she said, I can do anything for 21 days, but then I can always go. So that way your subconscious or maybe even your conscious doesn't think, well, I'm just going to go cold turkey. It's, to your point, try stuff, right? It's like, cut out this food for 2 weeks, or cut out media for 2 weeks, and then you can always go back. There's, it's like, well, if if it didn't make a difference, then it didn't make a difference to you, right? I mean, some people it affects differently. So again, I think that was, and for me, it became a game, right? It became, once I started having fun with it and I started feeling better, then it was like, well, gosh, what else can I find that makes me feel a little bit better, or maybe a lot better? I remember I did a 7-day detox fast, and man, at the end of that 7 days, I was on fire. I had more energy. I had more vitality. I was like, my mind was super clear, and I just felt happy. And then as I started reintroducing foods back in, I noticed that some of these foods affected me, that I was like, oh my gosh, that I didn't know I was allergic to gluten and wheat before, right? I just never had a clue, because I always ate it. And then once I came off the detox and I ate a dinner roll, and I was like, got all stuffed up, and I was like, maybe something's going on there. Maybe maybe the food, and that was one of the first times I started relating that food was causing things to happen in my body. It wasn't just a fuel, it wasn't just calories, right? I mean, a lot of times I think, because of some of the science over the years, it's like a calorie, and I'm like, no, not really. Calories not just a calorie. Eating an orange is different than eating a candy bar. Those calories aren't the same calories, right? But yeah, and so I would certainly encourage people listening that it's not a all or nothing. It's not a cold turkey. It's have fun with it. Because to your point, if you don't have some fun with it, then the worry about it is going to cause more damage to your psyche than not doing it at all, right? So don't make it try not to make it a heavy thing. Make it a game. Like when I go to a restaurant, it's a game for me. I look at the menu, and 90% of the menu, I just know that I'm not going to eat. So it's kind of like, cool, which thing do I get to eat? Right? What's my, what's on here that I haven't tried before that I get to eat, because I know that's going to give me more energy than take energy, which you've brought up as well in this. It's like, I didn't realize that food was actually taking energy from me. I didn't realize that some of the stuff I was consuming was actually making me tired and lethargic. And because there's, you don't learn that in high school. You don't learn that in college. That's a self.
You don't really learn that anywhere. I mean, like any formal.
Exactly.
I suppose nutrition. Yeah. And you lead me to a good point on it's so again, it's what you try to not allow in, but it's also what you allow in. And there too, you're talking about 2 to 3 weeks is pretty magic time for these sorts of things. So if you want to do the cut out aspect to see. Also, give yourself 2 to 3 weeks on trying new things.
Right.
I mean, on the flip side, that you believe, that you've heard, that you think could potentially be good for you. And this goes back to some of my earlier work, which is experiences. New experiences. I mean, they've shown that new experiences are one of the core fundamentals to a long life well lived.
Right.
So it actually extends your life when you consistently engage in new experiences and novel experiences. And a lot of people get caught in ruts. They get caught in ruts with their diet. They certainly get caught in ruts, since we're talking about it, in the products that they use, their cosmetics and personal care products and the home products. And a lot of people just get caught in these same old things.
Right.
I'm doing, if you question, I'm doing it because I've always done it.
Right.
I'm eating that because I've always eaten that.
Right.
I'm watching that because I've always watched
that. Yeah.
I wish I could grab, all the people that are addicted to, the major media, the CNN and the Fox News, and sit them in front of your show here.
Right.
True.
Right.
Not necessarily with me on it, but some, some of the best guests of all. And I think that would be a refreshing experience for many of them, because they're just not aware of these alternatives that can indeed be, far more nourishing for their being. And it's these things. So try new foods that you've heard are good for you.
Right.
Try new experiences. Anybody right now, paying attention to this, what have you always wondered about doing, trying? I don't care if it's hobby, sport, musical, instrument. Whatever it may be, some wild and crazy, experience, a journey, whatever it is, and ask yourself, why am I not doing that?
Right.
Am I downgrading the importance of that? It's super important. Again, we can go to you got one life, so we can go to that aspect of it as well. Why not fit that in? And people are typically surprised when they engage, in these new experiences. Even after a few weeks of doing it, they feel amazing. They feel better, because it's expanded basically their mind and their being. So it's what you cut out, and then what you bring in, including the new things you try. I challenge people all the time. It's really kind of cool. It's got its downsides, but it's cool that we can go, most of us today, here in the United States at least, and a lot of the Western world, we can go into their grocery store, some of these larger ones, and there are so many cool, vegetables and fruits.
Right, yeah.
And, I make a point. I'm lucky that I have this very cool market where they've got hundreds of varieties of things there, but others still, there's dozens that you haven't tried. Try, what is that weird looking fruit? Try that thing just to see. Make it fun. Yep. It's fun. You might end up liking it. I discovered my favorite fruit in the last year. Kumquats.
I've heard of that. I don't think I've had one.
Yeah. And I didn't even know. I mean, I'm in this field and in this world. And
right.
I'm like, wow, I never even, if you asked me before and I didn't see it sitting there in a grocery store, I couldn't even have told you what it looked like,
Right.
And that's a kumquat. They look like tiny baby oranges.
Oh,
well, of course I'm going to try it. That's my try of the week. And I grabbed a bunch, and man, I fell in love with these things. If you like, little sweet tartness, it's like orange, squeezed out to the intense max. I'm like, man, these things are amazing. I eat them all the time now. So it's like you won't know this unless you get into these different things. And it goes for movies as well, and other, there's great media out there. Don't get me wrong, and it's not just online. I mean, this is where it's burgeoning for sure. But there's a lot of cool shows and movies and stuff. It's just like people, they wander away to whatever's getting the most attention or the most push behind it, and they're not paying attention in those areas, which is why I love what you do. Again, I mean, and I truly, I mean, for more reasons than just being polite, I wish you amazing success.
Thank
because
you.
You're putting real good out there in the world. And that's an important thing for people. This is something good to consume. In other words, something you want to have inside of you.
Right, and that's really a huge part of what we do, is just how do we bring people that are, able to help us educate ourselves on different parts of life that are good, that are happy, that are joyful, that make us think, that make us grow, that make us want to be more purposeful. I mean, one of the things that we've that I've been focused on, or that we've been focused on, is really a lot of people feel like they don't have a sense of purpose, or that they don't know what their purpose is. And then of course that's going to lead to not feeling happy, not feeling motivated. Right. And so really we've talked about purpose a lot on the show. It's just, it's not always this big grand. You don't have to go you don't have to sell all your stuff and give it to charity and go on some, year-long sabbatical thing, right? It's more of to your point, what feels good, really feels good at a foundational level, right? Not just in the moment, not just pleasure, but what actually feels important to you, and then just start doing more of that. And it may be opening doors for people. It may be volunteering, but it may just be spending more time with your kids. I know that was a blessing during COVID for me, is just spending more time with my children. I mean, that alone was worth, all of the rest of it for me, because it was just like, wow, I'm so much closer to my kids than I was before COVID, just because it just changed what I valued. Even though I valued my kids before, when I actually spent more and more time with, now I'm even drop my boy off to school this morning. I'm just like, I wish I could just come to school with you today, right?
I feel the same. Yeah.
It's like I give him a hug, and we give hugs back and forth. I'm just like, I'm gonna miss you today. I mean, so that shifted that. So I think it's doing the things that feel good, and then learning about and exposing yourself to things that, that are better, that are better for you, or that potentially are better for you. To your point, you didn't even know what a kumquat was. You have. Just hearing you tell the story, that was an adventure in and of itself, right? It wasn't like you
mini adventure,
right? You didn't go to Fiji, you didn't, go to India, you didn't go to China, that was just something you went to your local market and you were like, wow, what is this? And it could have been horrible, or it was great, and that's part of life too, right? The experiment.
Yeah.
And I think we do get stuck in those ruts. I know I find myself in there, and I'm trying to always challenge myself. It's like, how do I get outside my box? Because that's the only way I'm gonna really, it's like. It's to me like when I'm in my box too much, the experience of life starts to be dull. It starts to dull down, and then I know when I get outside my box, it's like, oh wow, I have hope, and I have, joy, and I have optimism for what the future can bring. So it's important that we physically and mentally surround ourselves with people, I think, that are always challenging us to do that, right? In a very positive way.
Well said. I mean, you talk about finding a sense of purpose or feeling a sense of joy, accomplishment. It's instrumental what we're talking about here. You have to step out of the box. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got.
Right, exactly.
Period. Yep. I mean, that's just it. And I've worked with, a lot of, not just young people. I mean, there's people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even, beyond, who are still trying to find a new or a sense of purpose. And then when I've done a lot of one-on-one coaching in the past. These days, no, but I did. And people, I do hear that all the time, the sense of purpose, or the feeling of, they feel like a dangerous boredom almost is what I've called it, the same old. And I'm like, all right, let's break down your life. Who are you hanging out with? And it turns out it's the same people.
Right.
What are you watching on TV? It turns out it's the same shows.
Right.
What are you eating? Turns out it's the same food. Same. And yet you're expecting to find different?
Right.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? You have to bust out of that mold. You got to figure out, and not necessarily that all the people are bad that you're hanging out with. That's not the statement. There are some toxic people we've heard, you want to pay attention to that too. But the point is, you have to venture out into the new if you want to find your sense of purpose, if you want to find your happiness, if you want to be healthy. You just constantly have to do so. And it's not always easy, because it's, comfort is really, discomfort, but it's easy to get sucked into that so-called thing called comfort, your pattern. It's very easy to get sucked down into that couch.
Right.
I mean, which is a perfect metaphor for it all, just getting swallowed into that hole in the couch. Then you complain, nothing, life sucks, nothing. Well, of course it does. You're sitting there. And that's a metaphor for these larger, walls that we don't step out of, and we need to if we want to find our sense of purpose. You'll find, if you're looking for a career, I don't care if you're 20 or 70, you're looking for a career and you don't know what to do, go try different things. Volunteer at different places. You might hate some of them, but you're going to find one you love. You're going to find, oh my God, I didn't even know I enjoyed, putting, little plants in the ground. Well, there's, a career opportunity for you. You're not going to know those things. You're not going to know you like kumquats unless you go.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to say. You don't know you don't know what your kumquat is unless you get out and try some, right?
We got a new phrase out of it.
I love it. That's In fact, that should be our new tagline. Make sure you go out and find your kumquat, right? The thing. Find your kumquat. I did hear a quote, and I don't remember where I heard. I don't know who to give credit to, so I apologize. I'll have to look it up. But it said the enemy of a great life is a good life.
Ah, wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It's like, if we settle for if we want more, but we settle for what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. Right. That's just the way that it works. And so hopefully this show today has helped. It's helped me. Hopefully it's helped our listeners think about, challenge ourselves in at least little ways today to do something different. Right. I mean, just do something different, experiment. Go to the grocery store, buy something you've never bought before. Just those little baby steps. Let's, kind of re-energize or start to, it's one step at a time. It's not these giant leaps. A lot of times people think, oh, I've got to take this huge, no, just take one step and then build on that, right? And build on that and build on that. So, gosh, I loved having you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I already expressed my love for you and what you're doing, so
and
I really feel that.
And before we sign off here, the artofantiaging.com is kind of, you have products there. You have, it looks like a lot of blogs there about health and wellness.
Yeah.
And
no product. I mean, I have other organizations too, but we'll definitely center on that, because I guess so every year I put on a big summit. It's an online summit.
Yep.
And where I pull together usually in the range 21, really renowned doctors and as well as researchers, typically in health and wellness space, obviously, in some of the mind and motion work too, and pull this big event together. So it's a 7-day event where it's free. PBS style, I call it, meaning it's free if you want to sit there, there's 3 interviews per day for 7 days in a row, or, but people can purchase the package, the package they so choose, and it comes with all kinds of goodies associated with it, very PBS style, I guess. So I guess there's technically a product there, but other than that, there's information that's free there.
Gotcha.
I totally recommend everyone check out, the blog, and I'm honored, I'm touched, I am honestly humbled. I mean, we've gotten a following of over 700,000 there now. And simply it's because of putting out, like I said, just what I perceive as the truth, research based on, listen, that time of life. For my peers out there who are in their 50s or 40s or 60s or 70s, this ought to be, the best time of life.
Yes.
It really ought to be. And that's good news if you're younger and listening right now. You do have a lot to look forward to. It even gets better. It gets better and better. You're going to have experiences and stumbles and things, but, it ought to be the best time of your life. And that's ultimately, whether it's health focused, emotional health focused, that's what it's all about over there. It's just a lot of insight and research supporting that, whether it's food, emotions, or what have you. So theartofantiaging.com.
Love it. Brian, thank you for coming on the show today. We sure appreciate your time and all your passion and energy, and definitely go check out that blog and all the information there. I was reading that this morning, and I love what you're doing there and the education that you're putting out. So thank you so much.
All right. Find your kumquat.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to BriteVibe.com. That's BriteVibe.com. Thank you for listening.